Hey, friends, I'm really excited about this episode of the Church Planting Podcast. My dear friend Jon Tisevich is going to be joining us for just a pretty epic journey as we talk today about what it means to lead as a church planter, as a church leader, as a business leader in the context of being kind of a mountain climber, if you will, a climbing companion with others and a climbing companion with Jesus. Jon is currently just now transitioning into the lead role as the visionary senior pastor of an incredibly impactful church down in the Cincinnati, Ohio, tri-state area, Whitewater Crossing. And Jon has also been out to plant a church in San Francisco. He has a passion for church planting and seeing God's kingdom expand. And he's summited numerous mountains with me. And so we're going to welcome right now Jon Tisevich. Hey, everyone. I'm here with my very dear friend, Jon Tisevich. He's an amazing senior pastor. For me, most importantly, he's just a guy I respect. He's a climbing companion, and I just love him dearly. Let's welcome Jon Tisevich. It's great to have you on the Church Planting Podcast.
Thanks, Greg. It's good to be here, man. Hey, everybody.
Hey, Jon, so to give us an update, you just had a big transition, the formal transition, I think this last weekend. Where are you and what's going on now in your life?
Yeah, so I'm in just on the west side of Cincinnati, and this past Sunday, after about 2.5 years, we finished a succession, and I stepped in and officially have taken the helm as senior pastor at Whitewater Crossing. So weekend, lots of stuff. Quite the time to do a succession in the middle of 20 and 21. So,
yep. And so, Jon, there's a lot of story to this, though. But you are passionate about church planting and have been involved with Stadia for a lot of years. Where'd that passion come from?
Well, candidly, a lot of it came from the leadership of a senior pastor named Greg Nettle. Back in, I don't know, 2008, 9, 10, before Stadia journey, I kept hearing about the local church was God's plan A. And there's a whole lot of places around our communities, our country, and around the world where there are no churches. And so for me, it just made sense, not growing up in the church, not really being churched, but coming through church by way of people and community. When you started casting a vision for, we need to plant as many churches as possible, locally and globally. Kelly and I were in from the get-go, and we got to see it, taste it, feel it, both locally and around the world. And then we went off on our own adventures to start a new church out in San Francisco. And we still believe this is God's plan A. And so for us at Whitewater now, it's, all right, how do we begin this journey to be a church that plants churches that plants churches?
Yeah, talk a little bit about that at Whitewater, because I love your vision. You have kind of a broad vision. I'd love it's a great chance for your Whitewater people to hear it, but for everyone who's listening to be encouraged by this vision as well.
Yeah, so just real quick, Whitewater it's a 100-year-old ministry that has gone through so much change and evolution along the way in 100 years. But where it currently sits, it's a church that got really good at a traditional attractional model, and God blessed it. And man, I am inheriting the burden of a larger ministry that has been successful, and with that comes a different type of burden. But the heartbeat for Kelly and I is that we will be a sending church, and not just for the local area. Cincinnati sits in a tri-state area with Kentucky and Indiana, and we want to build out a network that is starting new sites, whether it's church plants or multi-sites or micro churches in the tri-state, but also in the region, and then throughout the globe. And so we are just now building a framework for that and starting to find partner churches to do that with.
Yeah. So, I'd love to hear that 100-year-old church. And in order for a 100-year-old church, historically, they've lost their effectiveness. I mean, that's the norm for 100-year-old churches. But with you now, I think you believe that Whitewater Crossing is just now entering its most productive phase.
Correct. Greg, David Vaughn, who I know you went to school with, David Vaughn, he set a foundation really for Kelly and I to step in and go, with all of the resources and leverage of this incredible congregation, we can fulfill some really big God dreams. And it is not the typical story of a 100-year-old church for sure, to now recreate itself again. But that's what we're doing.
Yeah, this hasn't been a 100-year-old church that's declining. I mean, Dave Vaughn's amazing, good friend. And I mean, he's kept that fire burning. But I love what you're saying in the kind of the passing of the baton, or I think the passing of the helmet, the gladiator helmet, which is,
it was.
Yep. It was more Dave's vision is for you to take it even farther, dive more into church planting and to renew it. Now, John, you've always had this adventurous spirit, and you had an adventure. You had an adventure with me recently. Tell us, when it's the first time we talked about this in the planning podcast. Tell us a little bit about what just happened.
Yeah, so we just happened to get back from Nepal, for those that don't know, and we were able to trek to Everest Base Camp. And I had fun a couple weeks ago telling everybody, we trekked, over 100 miles. We trekked up to 18,000 feet. We had all this 25,000 of elevation gain and loss, 18 days of hiking through rain and snow and sunshine and yak dung. I caught a parasite. I lost 25 pounds in 20 days. And we raised over $625,000 to start new churches around the world. So praise God for all of it except for the parasite.
Right. So 9 of us went to Nepal and trekked to Everest Base Camp. And I said, if it wasn't the hardest one I've ever done, it was certainly right up there.
It's really close.
And you and I was trying to remember how many mountains we've gone together in that one.
You and I together are getting close to 12. Well, we've been doing it for 12 years. I think the first one started back in 2010. So it's been a journey, a lot of mountains.
Yeah. And I love it because out of the Sermon on the Mount, when you read it in the message, it says that Jesus invited those apprenticed to him up to a higher place on the mountain, on the hillside. And then he sat down and he taught his climbing companions. And I've always viewed us together and those that climb with us and trek with us as climbing companions who are just happen to be invited up higher with Jesus, if you will, to sit down with him, and he teaches us on the mountain. Talk about that a little bit as we've climbed together over, like you said, over the past decade plus. What are some things you've learned on that journey?
Yeah. So I have not always lived this way, and I think you would say probably not you as well. But candidly, you and I can kind of like open up and show a different side now that we couldn't as younger leaders. Pace is one of the things that I've learned, that pace is everything. I know that I used to think, man, run out as fast as you can, as hard as you can. And that was a bit of a young buck, young blood mentality that I only learned in time. Man, that's not always healthy. And especially in climbing, but also in leadership, that pace is everything. Slowly is the fastest way to get to your desired destination. Most recently, one of our Sherpa on this Everest trek, he would say slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So pace, learning to slow down. That's a big lesson for me.
Yeah. So, that's just a fascinating thing because we do try to run at breakneck speed. And I know you're speaking to so many of our church planters that are listening or watching, and church leaders in general, business people. I mean, the pace we try to keep is generally unhealthy. And the reality is one of the things I love about trekking and mountain climbing is that you literally are forced to slow down. If you go at that fast pace, it will kill you. And the same is true in ministry and in life. So that's a great lesson, John. What else have you learned?
Position. So I'm gonna make fun of you, Greg. But you already learned this, and I already shared this with you. I think it was on our first climb, we were doing Pikes Peak together, and I have this picture of you, and I took it from the back because I was going slow, not because of the principle, but because I was out of shape. And I took this picture of the four of us, me, you, Julie, and Kelly, and there was the three of us, me, Kelly, and Julie kind of clumped together, and then you were like 100 yards out in front, and you were setting the pace, man, and you were trailblazing, and I was like, man, that's awesome. And then you fell into a sinkhole.
Yeah, exactly. Downstairs, I plunged in the snow onto my chest. Yep.
True story. And so what we have learned as leaders and as climbers is that the strongest climber is typically in the back. And we saw that on Everest. We had one of the highest esteemed Sherpas in the Himalayas as one of our Sherpas. And every trek, every day that we're on, he took the position of the last person in our entire team. And I remember one day just being back there and just asking him, why are you back here? You're the strongest climber. You're the one who knows the mountain the most. And he says, Sherpa leads from the back. And I thought I misunderstood him. I said, what do you mean? He goes, Sherpa leads from the back. And we started to unpack this just how they were taught is that the strongest climber is back there to be able to assess from the back. And there's other Sherpa there that they can communicate with and talk to if they need to make adjustments. But the Sherpa leads from the back to make sure we're at the right pace, we're going down the right path. I can see how everybody's is doing, and I can make adjustments if needed. And we talked about, how, hey, that sounds a lot like Jesus's teaching of his posture and position of where he would lead from as, King of Kings. If you want to be the best, then, you will serve. You didn't come to be served. So that has been, especially very candidly, as I step into being like, the quote senior guy, there's a temptation to take the position of I am the senior guy, or I'm going to be leading out so far out in front that people don't know even where we're going. You taught me on this climb that as a leader, you can't point so out in front that people they will either see it as impossible or they will be overwhelmed in fear if you point or lead from too far out in front. So just that leadership lesson of position is everything.
Man, John, that's just so rich. And going back to our first climb together with our wives, being alive, I came home and in my reflections and so forth, that was one of the things that God taught me on that climb was that, my job isn't to make sure Greg Nettle gets to the top as a leader or to get there first, certainly. My job is to make sure the team stays healthy and they all get to the top, right? And you can't do that if you're so far out in front of everyone that you don't know what's going on with the team. And so that was such an important lesson, I think, for me especially, but for both of us to learn as well. So, when you get up to 18,000 feet and beyond it, and we've been up higher than that, you're in thin air.
Yeah.
Talk about that concept and what it means leadership wise when you're running in thin air.
Well, aside from just pace and position, I think one of the things I learned on this trip personally is that not everyone is built and made for all altitudes. Everyone is called to climb mountains. Everybody has got a mountain to climb, and there's a guide for every climber. But Jesus, I'm only calling a few to go to this place. You see that where he takes, Matthew, John, James, or Peter, John, James, and he's like, hey, you're going to go to a different level with me. Then there's a 12 that you're going to go to a different level with me. Not everybody went to the same level with Jesus. And as we look to be leaders who are going, hey, what is the next mountain to go after? I really got to assess the team that I am calling and building. Are they built? And can I get them? If not, like where they are now, can I assess that they have the ability to climb at the same altitude as this current existing team? And that is hard. And maybe that may sound harsh, that not everybody's made for high altitude climbing, but just like in real climbing, there are health risks that come with high altitude climbing, and not everyone is cut up for that. There is a discipline and a training that is required to be at that altitude. What I love, like thinking back to Cotopaxi, it took a lot for us to get up to just base camp of Cotopaxi. But then at base camp, there was another round of training and conditioning just at base camp. So it wasn't that you were trained and ready to go to the summit just because you started. There was a whole other round of training and discipline and equipping just at base camp. And so there's just a constant, I've got to be a learner. I've got to be teachable. I've got to keep training even in the midst of the climb. And not everyone either gets that or is up to that.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit, because that's a really important principle. I mean, on one hand, we're saying our job as leaders is to get everyone to the top, and and as church planters and church leaders, we do want that to happen. But the reality is, as the church shifts direction and climbs another mountain, or as the church grows larger and it becomes thinner here sometimes, or if the church even shrinks and people don't want to be part of the team anymore, whatever the reality is, sometimes the team changes. And as a leader, we have to be okay with that. We have to make the hard calls. I mean, there are times on climbs, John, where the Sherpa guide will say, I'm sorry, you can't go up any higher. You're done. Yeah. And that's it. As a climber, that's probably the worst thing possible to hear. But we know the Sherpa guide has our best interests and the interest of the team in mind. And so we listen to it. Hey, I think as planters and leaders, we have to always be aware that the team's going to shift. And here's the thing that I want to keep in mind, I think, for myself as a leader, there may come a time, John, there will come a time, for all of us, when we're going to be the ones that are going to have to say, okay, someone, as Moses said, right? Someone else is going to have to lead into this next climb on this next part of the journey. And that's what Dave Vaughn just did with you. And we're all going to do it someday. And that's an important thing to recognize. Okay, I'm going to shift gears just a little bit here, because we're going to stay on the climb theme here, but this one was a little unique. Our very first climb was with two women, our wives, Julie and Kelly. And, but most of our climbs, John, have been all men. And on this trek, we had two women on the trek with us. And it's the first time that I've done an extended trek, big mountain, Everest, with mixed company. And I have to tell you, I absolutely loved it. What were your thoughts? What shifted for you?
When we first started talking to each other on Zoom calls and everything, and everybody was sharing messages on, here's what I'm doing for training and here's what I'm doing to get ready. The ladies, Nancy and Andrea, man, they were killing it, going to the gym, working out, joining CrossFit, climbing mountains just to get ready. And a lot of the guys, including like me and you, were just like, oh my gosh, these ladies are outpacing us. They're going to kick our butts, completely like dispelling the myth of like, well, the guys are the better athletes. Like they were setting the pace from the get-go. And then on the actual climb, the two of them, Nancy, who is, I think, in her 60s, she is out in front, always in the first pack, like really encouraging people to keep going. She never missed a beat, even when she was facing the suspension bridges that like she was afraid of. She was persevering and leading the way. We asked her multiple times, "You sure you want to do this?" And she was like, "Be quiet, I'm doing this." Andrea, she was a beast, even though she had multiple back issues, and she had some sort of what was it? I forget now. Something in her back was completely out of place. she kept persevering. She wouldn't give up. We were thinking, oh my gosh, we may have to like call in a helicopter and get her out of here. And there was no way that she was going to stop or quit and not persevere through it. So that was one of the grit that they showed. But two, man, having ladies on the climb, it just made us better. There's a tendency when guys get around guys and guys are left to guys in mountaintops away from civilization, we can get stupid in how we talk, and we can get like caveman-esque. And what the ladies did is they kept us at a place of like, we're going to be real, we're going to be authentic, we're going to be vulnerable, but we're going to make you better. And I think, why I know you and I share the same opinion of just, man, women in leadership and women coming alongside any area just makes any of us in any organization, any endeavor better, that we are better truly working together. And so I think it was a brilliant move. I think it was a gutsy move because it's not anything that you see a lot happen, especially in our experience. So you nailed it with this one, bud.
Yeah, it was so fun. And, I agree. So physically, they more than kept up. I mean, oh my gosh, they outpaced us. And, but I just loved, like you said, the insights in the conversation. We're getting to trek with two world-class leaders who happen to be women and all of those insights. And I just think we miss out so much, on a gifting that God's given when we limit, when we don't have kingdom diversity around, in everything we do. And I think that, in the church world, we're seeing more and more women planters and teams planting and so forth. The only thing is, on this trip, I said, man, the next one, I want it to be racially diverse as well. Yep. Because we haven't gotten there yet, other than people thought I was Indian.
You were Indian.
Asian Indian. Mistaken several times. Not because I was doing the work of a Sherpa, but just because of my dark skin color. And, but we really want to diversify in that way as well. But diversity just makes it just better as a team, as leadership, in conversation. Now, John, one more thing I want to talk about is just the idea of, Jesus is inviting us to climb with him. That's scriptural, straight out of the Sermon on the Mount. Climb up higher, come up higher with me, be my companion. Talk about experiencing God when we climb physically.
Yeah. So we learned this pretty early on the climbs that God is waiting for us on the mountain. It's never a question of will we meet God on the mountain, or I'm praying that I'll meet God on the mountain. He is waiting for us. There's an invitation of join me on the mountain. And so for us, it's the principle of our I'm going to empty out myself to make room for what I know I'm going to receive. On this trip specifically, I had this mantra going in that is now a mantra for just being back in the normal world is slow down, breathe, be present, empty out, be filled up. And it was rooted in that idea of, I know I'm going up the mountain to meet him there and to receive something. I am coming with an expectant heart to receive because I know he's going to be there and I know he's a good dad. Meeting him on the mountain isn't, it's not optional. It's not a question. It is going to happen. And it's more for us of, are you going to be aware of his presence? Are you going to slow down long enough to hear? Are you going to be so full of what you think you're supposed to be learning right now? And here's exactly what I'm bringing to the mountain. And here's what I need from my Father, which we can do, which I have done. Or are we going to come pretty emptied out, knowing that we can be filled up to the max if we come with that posture? So that has been a learning. I haven't always gotten that. But that knowing, hey, he's waiting for me. He's calling me there. That's a huge takeaway for me. And for me, climbing is hard. Maybe it's not hard for everybody. But for me, once you get above 15,000, 16,000 feet, climbing just starts to be strenuous and hard, and the breathing gets labored. and your body wants to give out. And there's multiple times where I'm just like, man, I want to give up. And we know this, but we take it for granted. Like, we're made stronger in our weakness. He draws close to those who need him, who are brokenhearted. That he draws close to those who are in the valley. Like, those are all scriptural truths. And in the mountain, we're always in a valley. On the mountain, we're weak. In the mountain, I'm a bit brokenhearted because this trek's never going to end. It's like, there's this beautiful, like, I'm going to meet you on the mountain because you physically are going to need me. So it's really cool, man. I wish more people could experience it. It is cool what you and I know, that when you get to a summit or you get to a mountaintop moment, you're seeing things that so few people see and experience. And I think we're experiencing a picture of heaven. We're experiencing God. And our hearts kind of break because we wish that everybody could see that. We wish that everybody could experience that. And the heart breaks a little bit knowing that a lot of people aren't and a lot of people won't. And so it hurts, and it keeps us driving to keep climbing mountains, to keep sharing what we know to be true, even though we know, unfortunately, not everybody's going to receive it or see it.
Yeah, I mean, that's, the reality is church planting's hard. Leadership is hard. We talk metaphorically about climbing the mountain, and anybody in leadership is a mountain climber, I would say. And the reality is, when we talk about why do you do what you do? I love meeting God on the mountain. There's no question. But what drives us too is, we get sponsors by the foot or the mile or the altitude to plant new churches, $625,000, because the single most important thing is, what about the people not that will not see that physical mountain, but don't know that Jesus is even inviting them up on the mountain with him because they've never heard the name of Jesus. And, that's why we help start new churches for the next generation. That's why I love our church planters and church leaders throughout the United States and around the world. And so we'll keep climbing, and I'm encouraging all of our planters, our church leaders, our business leaders who are following Jesus to keep climbing. Spend that time with Jesus, unplug, be out in nature, whatever it is to refill your tank where you can be close to God. John, you're starting your next mountain climb there at Whitewater Crossing. I'm excited to be part of that journey with you. Congratulations. And thanks again for being on the Church Planting Podcast.
Thanks, brother, man. Love you.